Look, it's depressing news. It's quite worrying, but it's not unexpected. We have been in a recession before the pandemic. We're in the deepest recession since the pandemic started. Unemployment had already reached an all-time high of 44% in the previous quarter. So really, we don't know how many more wake-up calls can we afford to have. Government needs to do much more to grow the economy, to stimulate it. It really needs to accelerate the implementation of the economic recovery plan. But equally, the banks, the private investment funds can't afford to continue to sit on the sidelines, and they really need to help provide relief to the economy, to avoid retrenchments and so forth. But this is a ticking time bomb. But equally, we also need to accept as society, what can all of us do to address this unemployment crisis? And there are two fundamental things we can all do as consumers, as workers, as ordinary people. One is to vaccinate. Part of this huge job losses is because you have a very low vaccination rate, and it forces government to keep us under restrictions. It makes it difficult for companies to return to full productivity, to ensure workers are paid, to avoid retrenchments, to enable workers to buy locally produced goods. So we have to vaccinate. That's one simple thing we can all do. If we're not going to vaccinate, unemployment stats is going to get worse next quarter. It's going to push past 50%. But also we need to say as workers, as businesses, as trade unions, as government departments, as the banks, what can all of us do to support local procurement? If we buy locally produced clothes, food, furniture, vehicles, etc., that creates jobs, it saves jobs, it will enable the manufacturing sectors to grow. So unless we're going to do that, unless we're all going to take our part in providing solidarity to other workers, to the unemployed, to the economy, then we're going to continue to go down this downward spiral. But also means, Zinga, that Eskom must be assisted to get back on its feet. Government must help it to accelerate the new generation investments, because the economy is not going to grow as long as Eskom is limping along, as long as we're having load shedding, etc., because that prevents mining and manufacturing and ordinary companies from working properly. We also need to tackle corruption in the state so that money can be plowed back into industrial financing, into providing relief to workers, etc. So there are many things we need to do, but there are also things that are within our hands as ordinary citizens as well.
All right, so the number of employed persons decreased by 660,000. I know you've just touched on that because of COVID, but there must be many more structural issues that are leading to the kind of figures that we're seeing, because even the Stats SA is saying that the labour market is better for men than it is for women. So in order to tackle unemployment, it's not just about short-term fixes, it's about deeper structural fixes.
No, there's many complex things that we have to hit at once, and honestly, it's a huge amount, but we have no choice. So we have to fix Eskom, for example. But we also need to fix Transnet, because if Transnet is not working, then the mining sector, the agricultural sector, the manufacturing sector, the motor manufacturing sector cannot get the exports in time to the markets in Europe or wherever. That threatens local jobs. If they can't get the goods to our cities in time, it threatens local jobs. If there's violence in the trucks, because we're not resolving the migrant labor issue there, that threatens those jobs as well. But also we need to fix PRASA, because if Metro Rail is not working, then workers cannot get to their employment on time. They lose wages, those companies are not productive, they retrench workers. There are many issues we have to do. We have to deal with crime. Investors are not going to invest in a country which is known for abusing women, for rampant levels of corruption and criminality. So there are many hard issues we have to fix. We simply don't have the luxury of time. Ministers and DGs, politicians, mayors have to deliver. You can't have a situation in Lichtenberg, for example, in the northwest, where the municipality is so incompetent, it can't pave roads or deliver electricity or water, that Clover, for example, withdraws from it, putting hundreds of jobs at risk, decimating the local economy. So I think we have many horror stories we have to fix. We don't have a choice but to fix them. And I think from our side as Cosatu, we'll continue to put pressure on government, on the SOEs, on Eskom, on the private sector, the banks. They need to come to the party, they need to fix these solutions. And these solutions can easily be fixed. They're not difficult things, but it requires political will, action, and it requires us to move for speed. We simply don't have the time to philosophize, to debate, to pontificate forever and a day when jobs are being lost on every single day.
All right, Matthew, is there a need to look at a new way of doing things, especially when it comes to employment in South Africa? I know there's a move towards the green economy by certain financial institutions who are saying that that's the way to make sure there's this kind of circular economy that you spoke about a little bit earlier on. There's also artificial intelligence and kind of new tech that's coming in. Unions seem to be reticent about that. But the solutions that you're also discussing seem to be perhaps solutions of the past. When you're talking about fixing state-owned enterprises, fixing something like Eskom, should we not be looking forward to the future as well, the new jobs that are being created and the potential there?
Look, we have to do many things at once, and that's an unfortunate situation. We have to look at short, medium, and long-term interventions. So some of the short-term interventions are expanding the presidential employment program, which has already helped to create 550,000 jobs in teaching, in health, education, early childhood education, etc. We need to look at immediate stuff like fixing Eskom, chance at PRASA. But you're right, we also need to look at the medium and longer term interventions. So that's why we welcomed the commitment announced by the President of a deal to invest 131 billion rand in new energy generation. We need those kind of things. So you do need a just transition, not just for energy, but for the entire sector of the economy, because changes are taking place rapidly. They will accelerate, as we've seen over the past 2 years, when, for example, people used to fly around the country to attend physical meetings. They now attend virtual meetings like the two of us are doing now. So we need to catch up those structural changes. If we don't do that, it means workers in those communities will be left behind. There is ample opportunities to create jobs. So, for example, on the energy front, we talk about renewable energy, but we often don't talk about manufacturing those solar panels, those wind turbines locally, because that can create jobs. That can create not only jobs for communities in Mpumalanga, it can create export opportunities for us to the rest of Africa, creating huge amounts of jobs. But it requires political will. You can't have government departments sitting on simple approval issues, simple application requests for 2 years, 3 years, for example. You need to have the Department of Mineral Resources, which at one stage had a backlog of about 10,000 applications for mining rights. That can create thousands of jobs in the mining industry. So we have seen some progress, for example, on that front, where they managed to reduce that backlog by half. So that's progress. But we really need to see a sense of urgency in politicians, in officials in government, but also in the private sector. So it's very positive that Treasury is now looking at amending Regulation 28 to allow pension funds a right to invest in infrastructure, because that's going to yield huge opportunities for those pension funds to invest, to help create jobs, but also to ensure that those pension funds themselves are part of the solution to the country, that workers themselves benefit from it. So there are many things we have to do, but I think the fundamental thing is we don't have the luxury of time. Voters spoke very clearly on the 1st of November. They are tired. The workers are fed up. They want to see unemployment falling and jobs being created, not the opposite. If we continue down this road, we can expect a far worse result in the 2024 elections to all political parties. We can also expect future ticking time bombs like we saw in KZN and Gauteng. Leave aside the criminal orchestration of those violence, but it did feed into a sea of poverty and unemployment and hopelessness. So if we don't address that, we are literally sitting on a ticking time bomb that will destroy everything.
Matthew Parks, Deputy Parliamentary Co-Ordinator from Cosatu, thanks so much for your time on SABC News this afternoon. Just giving us reaction to those statistics that just came out. We're going to be focusing on that for the entirety of On Point.